Good morning. Shout out to you, Natalie, for kicking us off. Thank you to the Yellow Coat team. This is a production for real, so thank you for inviting me to be a part of this experience. And shout out to all of you. I see some cool-ass hats in the crowd. This is like the coolest hat-wearing crowd I've ever met. So let me just do a quick temperature check to see where everybody is today. Is that cool with y'all? All right, make some noise if you give a damn about the legacy you leave behind. Okay. I'm in the right place, good. Because the world needs your story now, right? And today as we explore this theme of the present journey, we're really gonna unlock what it requires of us to tell the stories we need to tell to move our ideas forward and to talk about the legacy we're trying to leave and what we're trying to contribute to. Does that sound good to y'all? I like y'all. This is gonna be a good morning. So I have the privilege of spending 40 minutes with you today. So if anything really resonates, sometimes you get a vibe and you're like, I gotta share that shit. Use the hashtag #BecomeWhoYouAre and share it online with your tribe. Does that sound good? Okay, I like your head nodding in the front. That's good. You're giving me good vibes. So I want you all to close your eyes. And I'm watching. I can see you if your eyes are open. And I want you to think about the stories you consume every day. I mean, really picture them in your mind, the ones on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever news outlets you're subscribed to, right? Think about the stories that move you, that sadden you, that frustrate you, that ignite you. Hold them in the forefront of your mind. From Syria and Standing Rock, to climate change and immigration, from Charlottesville to Sierra Leone, and the notion of having to build a case for why Black lives and Black bodies matter. Yeah, and the beauty and the power of everyone in this room is that even if we're afraid, we're still useful. And we're at a crucial turning point where it's absolutely necessary for us to be able to communicate our truth and actively articulate that usefulness in the world, all right? Now, when I say useful, I know that kind of feels like a funky word, right? You're like, what do you mean useful? I don't want to get used. But what I mean by useful is valuable and productive. And it reminds me of a note that I hear in my morning meditation every day. You are an on purpose with a purpose to reflect and reveal the cosmos in a way that has never quite happened before. So I want y'all to marinate on that for just 1 second. And now I want you to consider your stories, the story or stories you've been telling about yourself and how you want to contribute. So raise your hand if every time you share that story, people get it. They know exactly what you do, exactly what you're up to, and how you want to make a mark. Raise your hands. This is a judgment-free zone, so it's cool if nobody gets it. All right? Now raise your hand if you fumble with that story a little bit and you're like, I don't really, I'm so big, right? I'm just so big, right? And I feel you. If you look around, raise your hand if you struggle with that story. It's cool, because we're all here to grow and learn and shift and pivot, right? I struggle with that shit too, y'all. It's real, right? And it's not an easy feat when you think about your life as a body of work or a body of experiences. There's work that comes with being able to shape that story. And in my own work, over the past 15 years, 23 jobs and starting 2 businesses of my own, I hate the question, tell me about yourself. It is the most anxiety-inducing question that you could possibly think of. And it doesn't even have a question mark at the end, right? It's just like, tell me about yourself, period. All right. And I used to have a lot of difficulty juxtaposing my reasoning for pivoting from radio to project management, or shifting from education to communications. And my worry was that because I'd done so many things, people would be like, this girl doesn't know what she's doing in the world. She doesn't know what she wants. Anybody ever felt that feeling like, I've done 17 things. If I tell you, you might just walk away from the conversation, right? But the interesting piece about that, as I worried and feared it, I was like, there's no getting around it. There's no way you're gonna be in this room for 2 days and no one's gonna ask you what you're up to or what you do, right? So I started to take it a little bit more seriously. And across the last 15 years of my career, I didn't know it then, but all of those skills that I was honing they weren't just bringing me closer to myself, they were grooming me for my purpose. So in order to contribute at your best, you have to exist fully and freely as all that you are. And we're going to explore what that means and what that looks like today, right? You have to explore that. All those quirks, those moving parts, those values, those beliefs, that's what shapes your identity and makes you a one of one. It helps you inform how and where you'll contribute. Because as I mentioned in the video, if you're not adding, you're subtracting. And you all know, like I know, we don't live in a time or space where we have the luxury of subtraction. But we do get to decide how useful we are. And because we get to decide, it's so important to remember that the process of becoming who we are happens through iteration. It's a process, it's a journey, it's not an end goal. You don't wake up tomorrow and just be all that you are desired and designed to be in this world, right? I mean, maybe. And if you do know how to do that, come talk to me about that later, please. And thank you, please, and thank you, right? So as we're thinking about this process, this journey of becoming, what does that mean? And what does that look like for us? So we're gonna explore it a little bit. In my own journey, currently in my endeavors, it took me a really long time to get that. But now, as an entrepreneur and an education producer, I've worked with thousands of students, entrepreneurs, executives, creatives, some who I'm so happy to see out here in the audience today. And through my communication agency and storytelling company, Oratory Glory, I've had the privilege of really helping to build on what communication looks like in the world. And my focus there is on helping to amplify marginalized voices by really navigating the nuances of interpersonal communication, helping people tell better stories, and thus really executing ideas in the world, right? The part that we don't talk about with stories is like, tell good stories, but like, why tell good stories? Because good stories create change. Good stories help you build your tribe. Good stories help you realize who you want to really vibe with and who is not your cup of tea, and that's fine, right? We need to be able to have those filters and those pieces. So my work has ranged from a ton of different things. Sometimes it looks like strategic communication support for a company who's like, how do we make sure our team understands our message so that they're out in the world championing that message, right? Sometimes it looks like developing curriculum for STEAM and STEM companies who want to make sure that the students they're serving can communicate well in the world. And sometimes it looks like straight up speech coaching for people who are on stages and want to make sure that their message is connecting with the world. But the one thing that's common, like all of you who raised your hands, while the collaborations have varied in my work, everybody has struggled with the stories they tell about themselves, right? It's not something we wake up in the morning and practice in the mirror. No one's brushing their teeth like, if someone hits me with tell me about yourself today, I got that 30-second joint locked and loaded, right? No one, if you are doing that, you too, come talk to me later. I might have like a space for you on my team, right? So I really started thinking, what can I do about that? So I did what most people do when they want to do something about a thing. Next slide. Backslide. I wrote a book, because that's what you do, right? When you're like, I want to get something out there. And because of my fascination with this necessity of becoming to unlock your purpose and really contribute to the world, I embarked on this 3-year journey. And it's so funny because a few of you I got to connect with at the marketplace yesterday, and you were like, what was your process? And I felt my brain kind of short circuit, like, slow blinks, like, what do you mean, what was the process? But this was a 3-year journey, and it's so funny because as I think about it today, and we'll talk more about the book in a second, the journey started with traveling around the country, doing learning and teaching exploration, where I developed the 6-step training process that's in this forthcoming book. And the intention around it is, how do you design accurate, artful accounts of who you are to move your work forward, especially in a world with the climate that we have. I'll only say 45 one time, but you know who and what I'm talking about, right? So I started teaching this method. I had a colleague who was like, we had team training. I used to work with an organization called the Future Project. And we had dream directors in high schools around the country. And when you hear dream director, you're like, ooh, that's sexy. But when you get into a school building, you're like, I'm your new dream director. People are like, what are you even talking about? What does that mean, right? And so when we were in training, my colleague Salome was like, can you do some skills training for us to go into schools? And I was like, for sure. What's most useful? And she said, teach us how to introduce ourselves. And I wish I had the little index cards with me, but I literally just doodled out this process on a note. It's like, what are the things you need to be thinking of as you introduce yourself? And that seed she planted was 3 years ago. I didn't know it at the time that it would turn into a book, but that was the final process, or the current process for where it is right now. And so I taught that process over the last 3 years to about 750 people. Executive leaders, students, transitioning students, my homies. Like, I got a big interview tomorrow, let's do this Team A thing. We're like, okay, Team A is a movement, it's a lifestyle, right? So I carved out this process, and it's really about how do you tell more intentional stories. So the book, that was like a moment for y'all to get all like jazzed. I should yell dance break. So the book comes out September 18th, and I'll tell you how you can get it before then, as we wrap up. I'm big on building suspense and anticipation. So the book comes out September 18th, and when I thought about that question yesterday of what was your process, I was like, oh, what is my process? So I'll tell y'all, because it actually is 6 steps as well. Dream it up, write it down, phone a friend, decide what's feasible, make a plan, and get to work. And when I say dream it up, I mean think as big as you possibly can. Like, if this thing caught fire, what's the best that could possibly happen? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna start to think about Team A, the book, like my first album. And when I met with my publisher, they were like, what do you want the book to do? I said, I want this book to go platinum. Whatever the equivalent of platinum is for a book, I want that thing. I want that thing. And I started Googling, like, I literally Googled, what is platinum status for a book? And nothing real came up. But I just decided on a number. I was like, okay, I want to sell 100,000 copies of this book by December 2018. And that was like, okay, we got a goal, folks. We got a goal. Dream it up, write it down, right? Because that is big. And one of my mentors always tells me, passion ain't shit without strategy. So I was like, okay, 100,000 books by next December sounds good in theory. How might we actually make that happen? And my friend Tanya is in the audience, and her practice of reverse engineering is exactly what I did for the book when I said write it down. What will it take me to get from December 2018 to like this moment right now, right? You're like, yeah, I planned, next December. It arrives, and I'm like, oh yeah, nothing happened, right? So make a plan. Well, write it down. And then I phoned some friends. And for me, as someone, like I mentioned in the video, growing up really shy and introverted, I build in a little cube. I'm like, when I'm ready to share it with the world, I'm gonna let it out. But I think that's a challenge with the world and social media. You get to see the highlight reel. You don't get to see any of the pain points. And when people can't see or resonate with your struggle, sometimes they quit and jump ship in the middle of their ideas. So I'm like, okay, this is a painful process. We're gonna get through it. Right? Dream it up, write it down, phone a friend. I told as many friends as I possibly could. And I was like, I'm writing this book. They would hold me accountable. How's your book going? I'm like, some days it was like, it's not going. It's not going at all. Because in my mind, if any of you who are thinking about writing a book, I was like, oh, this is gonna be sexy. I'm gonna be like on beaches and like, I'm just gonna be kicked up. Who has had that feeling about that's what it means to write a book? I'm like, this is gonna be luxurious. It is not. It is not, it is not. I'll say it 3 times. So I was like, okay, I could do this. It was a process of unraveling, especially when writing a book about how to tell your story, because I realized where some of my own missteps were. I was like, oh yeah, I do resist when people are like, tell me about yourself. I'm really good at spinning the conversation back to other people. Like, I've become a master at that, right? So the phoning a friend was super useful, and then deciding what's feasible. Because the first version of this book, I was like, I wanted to have like a perforated storyboard that you can pull out on page 72 and like hang it on your wall. And when I talked to my publisher about that, they were like, that's cute. I was like, I want color copies, and I want you to be able to, like, I had a big, big vision. But I like the idea of keeping a big vision because no matter where you land when you execute, it's something useful and powerful for the world, right? So dream it up, write it down, phone a friend, decide what's feasible, make a plan. So for me, making a plan, if you're anything like me, being a solopreneur early on is really hard. It can be really isolating. It can be really challenging. You think you're at it alone. So I built an amazing team over the last year. I have a developmental editor, I have an ops and projects lead on my team, I have a comms team who handles comms, and I have a cohort of just brilliant homies who are there for me when I need them, right? So we made a plan. We have a powerful plan that I feel really good about, and I'll share one of the pieces of that plan with you today, and then get to action, right? So many amazing tools that help us do great work. I know that time management is not my strong suit. I make a list of 27 things I can do in a day when you know you can probably do one thing really well in a day, right? But again, that big picture thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, I can go, now I'm in LA, I can see like 6 people today. That's not a real thing. You can see one person, if you can have 6 people meet you at one place possibly, right? But a lot of things that were really helpful for me were getting real about my time management. So I live and die by my calendar. I block out all of my time in the calendar, from walking my dog, to taking 30 minutes of breakfast for myself, to like taking a walk. I fill it all up in my calendar. We use Asana, we use Slack. I have a separate section in Asana for my personal projects. I sync my Asana tasks to my calendar. You see where I'm going with this? I'm also a Virgo, which is probably helpful to know. And that's what you are too? That's why you were so excited? See, it's true, it's a real thing. And that's like this process that I went through with the book of like self-awareness and knowing myself. I'm like, okay, so this is my process for how we are going to make this happen. So the book, as I mentioned, September 18th is the release date. And I know we just have 40 minutes together this morning, but I want to walk you all through one of the steps in the process. Does that sound good to you? Would that be useful? I like you all. I want you to all write down, make space on your page for 4 sections, because we're going to go through the discovery process. So I want you to just make a section for all 4 of these things on your page. And I want you to think about these circles as discovery buckets. Because the biggest hurdle we all have with tell me about yourself is like, there's so many different things I could tell you. How do I figure out which pieces of that story to tell? These 4 buckets are the wells that we draw from when we're talking about who we are and what we do. So we've got your background and interests, your values and beliefs, passions and aspirations, and your skills and achievements. I'm going to walk you through each of these 4 discovery buckets with some guiding questions so you can start to excavate the meat and potatoes of your story. That made me a little hungry, but that's okay. So first we've got background and interests, right? This is how you're rooted. This is where you are, who you are. So the first question I want you to consider is, where are you from, and how has that background impacted who you are? Where are you from, and how has that impacted who you are? I like this. I'm seeing some serious stationery kits in here. I'm a stationery nerd, so I'm like, someone asked for a pen yesterday, and I was like, you can't hold my Sharpie, sorry. I'm like, can you make sure you give it back? What's your number? What's your number? So where are you from, and how has that impacted who you are? The second question I want you to consider, and you can keep doodling on these and come back to them later as well. What are your interests? And the connecting piece to that is what piqued that interest, right? Because if we think about just our interests, we can come up with a list of like 7 things, and that's the end of the conversation. But what piqued that interest? Because I know what piqued my interest in storytelling was growing up shy and seeing how many times I was overlooked because I was silent. Just seeing how many people would just guess without knowing anything about me because I was silent, right? So what are your interests, and what piqued your curiosity in those things? And the third question I want you all to consider, and again, take this home and keep working on it. How do you spend most of your time? I met someone at the marketplace yesterday, and she told me about what she was working on. And then I said, what are you most excited about? And she completely geeked out about this blog she's building. I'm like, okay. What do you spend most of your time on? Take a minute to think about that. All right, I'm going to pause you there. We're going to go to the second discovery bucket, values and beliefs. I like to think about these as all those things that you would fight for and die for, but you choose to live for them instead. All those things that you would fight for and die for, but you choose to live for them instead. Because we don't want you to die for them. We need you to be here. So the first thing I want you to think about is, what do your friends count on you for? What do your friends count on you for? I'm definitely not the friend you count on when you need a new curling iron, or you left your stuff at your bag got lost in the baggage claim. It's been a long time since I had to curl my hair. But I do know my friends count on me when they need a discerning ear, when they need someone to just listen and not judge, right? Because I value listening. I don't think we listen enough. Right? So what do your friends count on you for? And what are your top 3 core values and why? The key to digging deeper is asking why. Simon Sinek does some great work around that too. Shout out to the start with why folks out there who know what's up. Yeah. Cut the check, Simon. We're plugging you here. Just kidding, but not really. All right. What are your top 3 core values and why? Third question I want you to consider, and sometimes these can be hard to address. Are you in alignment with those values in your day-to-day work? Are you in alignment? It's okay if you're not. That's what chiropractors are for. And I'll take it a step further. What do you need to do to get back in alignment? I had a super close friend who recently put in notice at her job because she was starting to feel it in her body that it wasn't right for her anymore. How many of y'all have had that feeling of yeah, ooh, look around, yes. The last job I ever had, I felt it in my body. I was like, am I sick? I'm sick. Holy shit, how did this is really a thing. There is a thing too. It's actually, when I met with a doctor, there's a condition called adjustment disorder. And it's when you are having difficulty adjusting to a new experience that gives you anxiety, and it shows up in your body. There can be bouts of depression. It's a real thing. And you see, because so many of you showed your hands. It shows up in your body, right? So let's go to the third bucket, passions and aspirations. I like to think of this bucket as all of those big things you've dreamt up based on what you value and believe, and based on your background and interests. So because I'm a big dreamer kind of girl, I want you all to doodle, what's the biggest vision, the dream that you have for the world, and why? Write it down. Draw sketches. What's the biggest dream you have for the world, and why? So the second question I want you to consider, you've got that big dream down. Now as we think about the small steps that you can take, what are you doing to act on those things right now? And again, this is a judgment-free zone. If you're not in action around those things yet, that's fine. But you can write down some things that you want to be doing. Clearly, being here is a step toward acting on something or uncovering what those passions are. I know my big, big, big dream for the world is to create institutes for human development where we can learn those skills for process and ideation, for communication and relationships, for leadership and self-development, the stuff we don't learn in the K-12 space yet. That's my big dream. So keep thinking, keep doodling, and then we're going to take it to the last bucket, skills and achievements. This is my favorite one. It used to be my least favorite one, but my homegirls like to call this your receipts, right? That's the proof that you've actually acted on all those things you've been dreaming up, those passions, those values, that background, right? And sometimes we get caught up. Raise your hand if you don't like talking about your achievements because it feels like you're bragging, right? I feel you. I used to be there too. And then we reduce what we do, and then what happens? We don't make the connection we needed to make, or people overlook. And you're like, oh shit, but I've done that. I've been doing that for the past 10 years, but you didn't tell them. You didn't say that. You kept it cool. You're like, I shoot, I take photos. But your stuff's in National Geographic, though. Come on. Flex those receipts, right? And we think about it as a bad thing, but it's really not about ego or bravado. It's about confidently sharing how all those skills you honed and you've been busting your ass to develop or that you were naturally gifted, how you're applying those for good, right? You're not stealing animals or you're not doing anything crazy, hopefully. Don't come talk to me later if you are. But you're doing good, right? So I want y'all to just list. Have a receipt moment right now. What are some of the skills that you really value in yourself that you've been killing it? And what are some of the achievements? And my friend Tanya is in the audience. She knows that I'm not a talk about your skills and achievements type. But I did bring a couple receipts with me today. This year alone, I got a publishing deal. And that was because I talked about what I was doing. Are you all familiar with Creative Mornings? So in December, Creative Mornings, they have like a 30-second pitch that you can do. And I was in Oakland, and I was like, oh, I should talk about Time. So I was like, I have this book coming out next year. We were going to self-publish. And I was like, I'm doing one-on-one sessions to coach people around the method. So if you're interested, come talk to me. And a guy literally came up after and was like, I know a publisher who might want to print that. And I was like, skeptical face. I was like, okay, cool, introduce us. January, he sent the e-introduction. February, I had a meeting with a publisher. April 1st, my manuscript was due. Exactly. That's what I said too. That was me, right? But again, talking about your skills and achievements. I built a website for myself this year, which I hadn't done before. All of my work was like hidden under the guise of oratory glory. I got featured in Glamour magazine this year as one of 6 women using their voices to change the world. I was like, okay. Thanks, ladies. Appreciate that. So I want you all to think about your receipts, and they don't have to be big. Some receipts are for $2.99. Some cost you $750, right? But they all count, right? They all count because they are all a part of this body of work. Because had I not had that conversation with Salome at the Future Project 3 years ago, there would likely not be a Tell Me About Yourself book. But those first six postcards that I doodled on the ground, that was an achievement for me. So write down those skills and achievements. And how are you sharing those right now and talking about those right now? And of course, when we think about the words accurate and artful, I'm not asking you to roll up with a scroll and be like, what are you up to? Here are all the things that I've done, right? There's a way to finesse them in conversation so they actually play a part in the bigger picture of what you're trying to do. So these are your 4 buckets. If you have questions about the buckets later, come talk to me. There are 5 other steps that go along with these, right? But these discovery buckets begin to be the base of the conversations that we're going to have, right? And when you can really lean into these and really own these things fully, that's self-actualization. And that's where the good stuff starts to happen. We don't talk about self-actualization a lot. We feel it happening. We feel ourselves changing. A new moon cycle comes around. We're like, okay, this new Leo new moon, I'm feeling good vibes, right? But what happens when we actualize on our own? It leads us to actualize in community, right? So that's why it's so important that once you self-actualize, don't break away from the process. Keep leaning in. Keep thinking critically about how you show up in the world and how the way you show up may affect people, how it may exclude people, how it might include people, because when that happens, it creates a domino effect. It's beautiful. The minute you speak it, the minute you share it, you start to connect dots with folks who are doing similar things to you. You begin to make partnerships, you build relationships. That's where the beauty really happens. And that's how we scale change, together, collectively. But it's a self-process that leads to a process for all, which I get really geeked out and excited about thinking about. So when you think about where we are right now, there's no better time in this moment when we think about the atrocities going on, the big challenges. There's no better moment than now to become who you are. All right, there we are. Just got to point it to the back. That's how you get it. Oh, come on. That's spoiler alert. Don't look. All right. There's no better moment than now to become who you are, right? And I want y'all to really look around this room right now. When you think about those 4 discovery buckets, there's 5, no, for real, really look around. Some of you did like a head nod to the left, to the right, right? There's like 500 people in this room who you can connect the dots with, and you have all day to do that. So I urge you to do exactly that, because when you do, some amazing stuff is going to come from it. And as you're thinking about that story you're telling with people, as you think about what happens beyond this moment, right, because that's the power of conferences, you get pumped up for 2 days, and you're like, oh, wait, I have to go back into the world after this. Like, how do I carry that juice? I've been to so many conferences, and I left, and my friends were like, you need to calm down. Like, you are on one, and you need to just, like, take it down. And you need that time to process, right? So what do you do after that space? How do you carry it into the world? So I invite you to take the challenge. Man, I invite you all to take the challenge. In this present journey, my theme is ship that shit. Because I sometimes get so hung up on aesthetic and perfection and like it has to be so good. And like 6 months can go by and like just put it out there. Just like make the thing and share the thing. Iterations, you'll make it better, you'll improve upon it. So if you all go to teamebook.com, today is the first day that we are opening signups for the challenge. And I like that, it's a woo crowd, that's what I'm talking about. So what is the Team A Challenge? It's a free 4-part video series where I will guide you through the 6-step process, after which you'll walk away with a 30-second introduction that is killer. One that really merges and amplifies the arcs of your personal and professional journeys. So you can sign up for that effective now. The challenge officially kicks off September 6th, and in my ship-itness, I was like, we're gonna launch it tomorrow, and then I was like, but wait, after they leave here, are they really gonna do a Team A challenge? They need some time. Labor Day's coming up, right? There's some breaks coming. So September 6th is when you'll get the very first kickoff email with the videos. So I invite you all to take that challenge. Also, if you're around tomorrow, I'm teaching a Tell Me About Yourself workshop. I think the capacity is for 20. When I checked yesterday, there were 12 folks signed up. So if you are interested, you can take the workshop. I will teach you the method. The book comes with a really cool downloadable storyboard. I have storyboards with me, and you'll get a free copy of the book. If you look under your just kidding. It's not an Oprah moment at all, but I've been dreaming of an Oprah moment. It's like, you get a book and you get a book. But that's not true. That's not true. What is true, though, is actually when I came here, I got the first 100 advanced copies of the book. So if you come see us in the marketplace, I think we sold about 25 of them yesterday. I'll be happy to talk with you more about Team A. You can get a book in your hands today. The rest of the world won't have it till September 18th. It's really my silhouette on it. Yes, that's really my head. And, you know, when I think about that big picture goal of like, where's this book going? To me, it's so important that we hear more stories and that we make those meaningful connections. So I invite you all to take the challenge. And the world needs your story now, so please, please, please remember that. And because we have time, I'm gonna take a few questions. I said that, but I don't know if we really have time. Do we really have time, production folks? Because I know production team is probably like, shit, we don't. Do we have time for like 3 questions? Who am I taking cues from? Okay, no one told me no, so. Someone said do it. Any questions? Yes. How do you push past the fear of taking the next step when the voices are in your head? Excellent question. I talk to the voices in my head. And I know that sounds, I actually don't really care how it sounds, but I talk to the voices in my head, right? And for me, I've learned that verbalizing a thing out loud is so useful. So I'm like, okay, I know you're feeling afraid right now, but we're gonna navigate through this moment. And I'm like, what would happen if I didn't take this step, right? So for me, the fear of not doing is way greater than doing and failing, because failure is where we really get the lessons, right? So I talk to myself out loud, though, because I can't, if I keep it in my head, then the voices get all jumbled, and that's just like, but I really tell myself, you're okay. We're okay. You have all the tools you need to do this work. And if you didn't, then the idea wouldn't have planted itself at all, period. And then I talk to people about the idea, because I know I have friends who will hold me all the way accountable. They'll be like, what about that thing you said you were gonna do? I'm like, true. Let me get back to that thing. And third, ask for help. If you feel like it's bigger than you, talk to some people who can help you map it out and really create concrete steps from like A to Z. What is this I really need to do? And I would love to hear about that thing that you're feeling fear around. Come talk to me after. Okay. Other questions? Questions, yes. Ooh. To be completely honest, I pray for discernment every day. Every day, like every day, to discern good from evil, to discern how to dissolve the habits and beliefs and behaviors that don't serve me. Like, I pray because I'm very clear in my mind that I know I want to see the good in the world and that I believe in the best of everyone, but everyone's not there yet. And that was my biggest challenge around discernment. It was like seeing the potential in a person and being like, you can come along, like you're ready. But not everybody's ready, and they have to come in their own time. So I pray on it every morning, every morning. How do I discern? How do I release? How do I slap my own hand when I'm tripping? And I saw one more hand in the back there, yes. Can I give my 30-second introduction? Right? Does someone want to time me? Okay. Oh, and you're recording it? Oh, wow. No pressure. No pressure, though. Yep. So growing up in New York City, I learned 3 really vital lessons. The necessity of speaking up for yourself, the art of building meaningful relationships through conversation, and the power of communities coming together to support and educate each other. So today, 23 jobs and 2 businesses later, I apply those lessons to curate experiences for artists and entrepreneurs like me to not just do their best work, but live their best lives. But wait, what was the time? Yes. Okay, it works. Teammate really works, yeah, it really works. Oh my gosh. But I thank y'all so much for your time. Please remember how powerful we are when we go further together. And I can't wait to chop it up with y'all at the marketplace. Thank you.